So it's not exactly another drone strike on some stateless tanker nobody can identify. It's actually the first time in 3 years that Russia has sunk a fully commercial cargo vessel outright. And that distinction matters more than almost anyone covering this story is giving it credit for. Let's orient ourselves here before we get into this. On July 26th, a vessel called the Golden Leo was operating off the coast of Ukraine when it was struck by 3 Russian cruise missiles. The crew abandoned ship, and the vessel ultimately succumbed to its damage and went down. Understand what makes this different from the hundreds of other strikes we've tracked in this war. This is the first commercial vessel sunk by Russian forces since the very start of the conflict back in early 2022, when a ship called the Helt was sunk off Ukraine's coast. 3 years. Nearly 200 vessels struck in that time, and yet this specific outcome, a full sinking of a commercial cargo ship, hadn't happened again until now. Before we go further, if you're new to the channel, take a moment, subscribe, and hit the bell so you're alerted when new episodes come out. This channel exists to catch these shifts before they become headlines everywhere else. And here's a question for you as we get into the details. Where are you watching this from? Is your country's shipping or grain supply connected to the Black Sea trade right now? Let me know in the comments, because this incident touches more supply chains than people realize. Now let's break this down properly, because the Golden Leo didn't happen in isolation. Ukraine has been striking Russian vessels since this conflict began, and the numbers are substantial. As of this week, 196 ships have been struck in total, 126 of those in the Sea of Azov and 70 up in the Black Sea. Ukraine launched an operation called Malka, specifically targeting Russian shuttle tankers, smaller vessels, roughly 7,000 tons each, that ferry oil out to larger tankers waiting offshore for a ship-to-ship transfer. That's the mechanism the Russians have been using to move Black Sea oil around sanctions, and Ukraine has been actively disrupting it. Let's take a look at how that shuttle system actually works, because understanding the mechanics here matters for understanding why Ukraine chose to target it in the first place. Russia's Black Sea oil terminals load these smaller shuttle tankers because larger vessels, the kind capable of carrying 1 million barrels or more, often can't get the draft they need at certain loading berths, or the operators simply want to avoid sending a high-value asset into contested waters for the full loading process. So you get a chain. A dozen or so of these 7,000-ton shuttle tankers make repeated short runs from port out to a rendezvous point, where they transfer their cargo to a much larger tanker waiting in safer, deeper water. That larger tanker then carries the full cargo out of the Black Sea entirely, often meeting up with additional vessels further along the route to obscure the oil's original point of loading. It's a workaround that's been used for years to manage both physical constraints and, more recently, sanctions evasion. Operation Malka went straight at the weak link in that chain, the small shuttle tankers themselves, because disabling them chokes off the entire system upstream of the larger vessels. But here's the shift that matters, and it's the reason we're talking about the Golden Leo specifically. Ukraine widened its targeting beyond those shuttle tankers to commercial vessels operating more broadly in the open Black Sea. Understand that Ukraine had already been using sea drones to hit stateless, dark fleet vessels, ships with murky ownership, no clear flag allegiance, operating in the sanctions gray zone. Those strikes didn't generate the same reaction, because those vessels exist specifically to be deniable. Nobody wants to claim them. Nobody wants to defend them diplomatically, and insurers had already priced them as high risk long before any of this happened. The Golden Leo strike is different in tone and in target, and it lands right at the same moment we saw a related strike further east. On the same broader timeline, a vessel believed to be a 90-meter cargo ship called the Anna, along with a Russian patrol vessel, was struck on the Caspian Sea, suspected of carrying weapons and supplies from Russia into Iran. Now here's why that connects directly back to what happened with the Golden Leo. These two strikes, one in the Black Sea and one in the Caspian Sea, start to show us that the war between Russia and Ukraine and the broader conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran are no longer operating as two cleanly separate theaters. They're beginning to physically overlap on the water through the same naval tactics. sometimes against vessels connected to both conflicts at once. Understand the geography for a second, because it matters. The Caspian Sea is landlocked. It has no direct connection to the Black Sea by open ocean. The fact that Ukraine is willing and able to reach that far, striking a supply route that specifically serves the Russia to Iran weapons and materiel pipeline, tells you two things. First, that Ukraine's naval strike capability, largely built around long-range sea drones and precision targeting, has extended its operational reach considerably beyond what most people assumed a year or two ago. Second, that Ukraine now sees value in disrupting Russia's external relationships, not just Russia's domestic war effort. That's a strategic broadening, not just a tactical one. Let's talk about why Russia's response matters here too. In the month leading up to this, from around June 20th to July 20th, Russia struck approximately 28 ships berthed in Ukrainian ports. So this isn't a one-sided campaign. Both sides have been escalating against commercial and quasi-commercial shipping simultaneously. What changes with the Golden Leo is that it demonstrates Russia is both willing and able to fully sink a commercial vessel again, not just damage or disable one. That capability had effectively gone quiet for 3 years, and now it's back in play. Now, understand something about why that 3-year gap existed in the first place, because it's not an accident. Sinking a fully commercial, insured cargo vessel carries diplomatic weight that damaging a stateless dark fleet tanker simply doesn't. When you sink a ship with clear ownership, clear insurance coverage, and a documented flag state, you create a paper trail that can be used in international courts, in insurance disputes, and in diplomatic pressure campaigns. Russia, for 3 years, appears to have calculated that the reputational and legal cost of that kind of clean sinking outweighed whatever tactical benefit it provided. Striking dark fleet or stateless vessels avoided that entire problem, because there was rarely a clean party to answer to. The Golden Leo breaks that pattern, and in my opinion, as someone who's spent years around maritime risk and vessel tracking, that's the real headline here. Not the sinking itself, but what it signals about Russia's risk tolerance shifting. Here's the human cost that most coverage of this conflict tends to skip past. Seafarers, the actual mariners crewing vessels in this region, are reportedly pulling back from Black Sea trade because crew members are being killed in these attacks. We don't have precise, verified casualty numbers because no official body has released clean figures on how many mariners have been killed or wounded across this entire campaign. What visibility we do have comes largely from footage circulating on social platforms, and it paints a picture of civilian crews absorbing real casualties in a conflict they have no say in. Understand what that pullback actually does to the shipping market in practical terms. When experienced crews start refusing assignments to a specific region, shipping companies face a labor shortage that isn't solved by paying more money. Because at a certain point, no amount of hazard pay compensates for the genuine fear of being killed on a routine cargo run. That forces companies to either pull vessels from the route entirely, staff them with less experienced crews willing to take the risk, or offer such extreme compensation packages that operating costs on that route become unsustainable for anything but the highest value cargo. All three of those outcomes reduce the overall capacity and reliability of Black Sea shipping, independent of how many ships are physically damaged or sunk. Now let's talk timing, because this sinking couldn't come at a worse moment for Ukraine specifically. Ukraine is heading into harvest season. Wheat, sunflower seed, and other grain exports need to move out of the country in the coming weeks to reach world markets. Ukraine has historically been one of the largest grain exporters on the planet, and disruptions to that flow don't just hurt the Ukrainian economy. They ripple into food prices and food security in countries that depend heavily on Ukrainian grain imports, particularly across parts of Africa and the Middle East. Some of that cargo moves via the Danube River, but the Danube is currently running at extremely low water levels because of a severe heat wave across Europe this summer. That means the Black Sea becomes even more essential for Ukraine's economy at the exact moment that route has become measurably more dangerous than at any point in the past 3 years. Let's break down what low water on the Danube actually does to shipping capacity. because it's a bigger deal than it sounds. When river depth drops below a certain threshold, vessels have to load lighter to maintain safe clearance under the keel, meaning barges and river vessels that would normally carry a full load can only carry a fraction of that capacity. That means more trips are needed to move the same total volume of grain, which means more time, more fuel, and more cost per ton shipped. So even without any military risk involved, the Danube route was already operating at reduced efficiency this summer. Layer the increased danger of the Black Sea route on top of that, and Ukraine's export options are being squeezed from two directions simultaneously: one environmental, one military. Meanwhile, Russia had scaled back oil, pumping through its own Black Sea facilities for a period, and it's now back up and running again. So watch what happens next, because Ukraine has previously targeted oil infrastructure not just in the Black Sea region, but across Russia more broadly. And if that oil flow becomes a target again, this cycle of escalation on the water isn't slowing down anytime soon. Now let's zoom out for a moment and connect this to the broader pattern we've been tracking across multiple maritime theaters. This Black Sea escalation isn't happening in a vacuum. At the same time, Ukraine and Russia are trading strikes on commercial and quasi-commercial vessels. The Strait of Hormuz has seen traffic collapse by roughly 80% due to the ongoing conflict involving Iran, and the Red Sea has seen war risk insurance spike dramatically following Houthi strikes on Saudi tankers. When you look at these three regions together, the Black Sea, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Red Sea, you start to see a pattern of naval and quasi-naval conflict spreading across multiple choke points that the global shipping industry depends on simultaneously. That's a structural problem, not just three isolated regional issues. Here's my read on this, and I want to be upfront that this is my opinion, based on years spent tracking vessel activity and maritime conflict patterns. The Golden Leo sinking is not just a single incident. It's a signal that the rules of engagement on the water have shifted. For 3 years, Russia largely avoided fully sinking commercial vessels, likely because of the diplomatic and reputational cost of doing so. This latest strike suggests that calculation may be changing, and if it is, we should expect to see more full losses like this one, not fewer, especially as Ukraine's harvest season increases the economic stakes of controlling that water. And I think the Caspian Sea strike on the Anna reinforces that read. When you see naval strikes start showing up in a second body of water, connected to an entirely different geopolitical conflict, that tells you the tactics and the willingness to escalate are spreading beyond the original theater. These aren't isolated wars anymore. They're beginning to bleed into each other through the same maritime playbook: small vessel strikes, sanctions, evasion, disruption, and a gradual erosion of the old restraint around sinking clearly identifiable commercial ships. Let's also consider what this means for maritime insurers and shippers going forward, because that's ultimately where this trickles down to. Insurance underwriters price risk based on precedent. For 3 years, the precedent in the Black Sea was that fully commercial, clearly flagged vessels carried lower sinking risk than dark fleet or stateless vessels. The Golden Leo breaks that precedent, and underwriters will almost certainly reprice Black Sea war risk coverage upward in response, the same way we saw Red Sea war risk premiums spike after the Houthi strikes on Saudi tankers. Understand that this repricing doesn't just affect Russian-linked shipping. It raises costs across the board for any legitimate commercial vessel operating in or near that region, including the very grain export vessels Ukraine desperately needs moving right now. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Given that Ukraine has struck nearly 200 Russian-linked vessels over 3 years without a single full sinking of a commercial ship in return until now, do you think this Russian strike on the Golden Leo was retaliation for the broader pattern of Ukrainian attacks? Or is this Russia simply removing restraint it no longer feels obligated to show? Let me know where you land on that, and let's get a real debate going in the comments. If you got value out of this breakdown, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next update. Leave a comment, share this with someone tracking the Black Sea situation, and if you want to support the channel directly, hit that super thanks button below, or head over to Patreon. Until the next episode.